So welcome everyone to the Humanities Talks number 6, parallel session of the 5th Symposium of Rising Scholars. My name is Jin, as you may have seen me do the welcome kickoff. The goal of the symposium is to celebrate and publicize the hard work of all of our Polygence scholars, all of whom have tirelessly worked on their projects over the last couple of months. Today, we have 5 student presenters presenting on a variety of topics. In the room with us today is one of our judges, actually. Her name is Chiara, and she's a PhD student at Teachers College, Columbia, studying counseling psychology. She's a therapist, researcher, and educator with Polygence, and she will be scoring each of your student presentations along with myself. So we'll have 2 sets of scores, and we'll also have the presentations recorded just in case we need to confirm scores. So just to introduce her. And then again, with the Q&A, please type in your questions in the Q&A section on the chat on your right-hand sidebar if you have any questions for the speakers. And we will allot around 3 to 5 minutes for questions after each presentation. And the presentation time limit is going to be around 8 minutes. And we want to really stick to that because we have a full roster of 5 students today. So any questions, please put in the chat. And with that, I will invite our first presenter, Marley Melbourne, a student from Toronto, Canada, studying in Havergal College. So let me invite Marley.
Hi.
Awesome. Hi, Marley. And I will turn off my video and you can start screen sharing. Do you see the little screen share button next to settings on the bottom?
Yes.
Perfect.
I think that should be it.
Great. And ready when you are.
Perfect. So hello, everyone. My name is Marley Melbourne, and I'm thrilled to be sharing my research project with you all today. I completed an art-based research project on fashion design and third-wave feminism. As you can see on the bottom right corner of my screen, I drew my artist's signature on the slide. I wanted my slides to be reminiscent of my sketchbook because this research project is really meant to be an abstract look into my perception of the latest feminist movement. Let's get started. First, here's a little bit about myself. I live in Toronto, Canada, where I attend an all-girls school called Havergal College. This September marks my 14th year at my school, and I'll be graduating as head girl of the class of 2022. There are 3 main parts to my project that I'm going to take you through today. Part 1, Feminism in the 90s, is based on secondary research. I studied speeches, articles, and fashion archives in order to build my understanding of the decade. The second part is experience-based, as it focuses on fashion and feminism during my lifetime. I relied heavily on personal experience as well as collected data from a survey of my friends. The last part of my project is the culminating portfolio, in which I took my findings and displayed them artistically in a series of paintings, drawings, and clothing, which I designed and sewed. I'd like to say a huge thank you to my mentor, Desiree, for helping me with my project. And before I begin, I'd also like to clarify that my research on fashion and feminism centers heavily on information from North America. In 1997, the Third Wave Foundation asserted that third wave feminism was dedicated to groups and individuals working towards gender, racial, economic, and social justice. When I was deciding on which era of feminism to specialize in, it was this quote that really made it clear to me that I needed to look at the third wave. This time period represented a shift in the feminist movement to a place where women of diverse races were finally being accounted for. The first and second wave failed to recognize all women, so I knew when it came time to translate my findings into art, I wouldn't feel inspired or included. Although the first and second waves of feminism did have significant flaws in terms of diversity, the third wave benefited significantly from legal and professional improvements obtained by the women who came before them. I really appreciate how feminism in the 90s challenged the idea of beauty and femininity, breaking gender barriers and setting the tone for the world today. The third wave definitely had its drawbacks, including an unhealthy beauty standards in terms of body image, but in large, the research I found showed that feminism in the 90s was all about advocating for women who were self-aware, empowered, independent, and diverse. My next step was to analyze editorial fashion images to find correlations between the clothes and the movement. I noticed feminine details like lace trims and ruffled collars, as well as revealing clothing with high hemlines and transparent fabrics. women wore blazers, a traditionally male garment, in ways that were unstructured, comfortable, and revamped from previous 80s style. Feminine cuts on the traditional pantsuit proved that women could embrace their figures and make their mark on the workplace. But pantsuits also transcended the workplace and became a power symbol and a marker of the decade. The correlation between third wave feminism and 90s fashion was overwhelmingly clear. In the second part of my project, I focused on fashion and feminism in the 21st century. As said by G.D. Anderson in 2015, feminism isn't about making women stronger. Women are already strong. It's about changing the way the world perceives that strength. This quote perfectly encapsulates fashion's role in 21st century feminism. From data I collected in a survey of 17-year-old girls at my school, current day feminism is personified through clothing. Women are dressing to feel empowered. It's not that that strength wasn't there all along. It's that we're now developing our methods of displaying that strength through fashion to the world. As shown in these images, there are so many different styles which are popular for women today. This can be explained by the increase in fast fashion, which allows for cheap access to millions of styles, and the increase in social media, which allows women and girls to draw fashion inspiration from millions of people every day. For the final part of my project, I created a culminating portfolio. I wanted to demonstrate my findings by designing and sewing garments that embodied my research. As listed on this screen, there were so many skills which I learned by working with my mentor, and I also learned design techniques, including fashion sketching, which I elevated by using different mediums like acrylic paint, pen, and digital art. This piece is a fashion sketch that I included in my portfolio as a study of different materials. I wanted to practice drawing lace and demonstrating how layers of fabric rest on top of each other. This first outfit that I made was a navy set. The top is a transparent blouse that hangs slightly off the shoulder. It has a few buttons down the middle and elongated sleeves. The bottoms are simple navy mini shorts with a zipper down the back and a structured waistline. This outfit was inspired by a 90s Calvin Klein shoot with Kate Moss, and I think it emulates the daring nature of feminists in the 90s. It's rebelling against previous eras of fashion by featuring such short shorts and transparent fabric. And in my opinion, rebellion is a defining trait of third wave feminism. This painting was my take on a fashion sketch. I found this photo from a 1996 photo shoot, and I wanted to recreate it in my own style. I focused mainly on emphasizing the transparent fabric on the bodice and the lace detailing around the top. In terms of feminism, I loved how the girl in the photo was so unapologetic about fixing her makeup, and I wanted my painting to show that a woman can care about her appearance while still exuding a really powerful energy. In part 2 of my project, I mentioned looking at primary evidence, and this is an example of that. I found that many women find beauty salons to be a safe space. Within these establishments, women are encouraged to indulge in themselves, vent within a controlled female environment, and uplift each other as well. The empowerment within beauty salons is an unparalleled microcosm of broader feminist discussions. Especially within the female Black community, hair salons are important. Research shows that Black women have fallen victim to workplace discrimination and broader hatred due to the genetic nature of their hair. Beauty salons represent a breaking of the cycle in which Black women are made to feel ugly, because while inside of the salon, the employees are dedicated to making everyone feel beautiful. It's within these community places that larger social issues are tackled. Fashion doesn't stand alone. It's complemented by other art forms like hair and makeup, which are equally important in the full story of how people express themselves. This dress that I made is my favorite piece in my portfolio. When I first saw the inspirational image on the right, I loved how the dress's simplicity forces viewers to consider the beauty of the woman wearing the dress rather than the dress itself. So it's a slip dress fitted with darts in the front and a zipper down the back. I know it looks simple, but there are many subtle techniques that allow it to curve around the body and flatter the model. So this was a really exciting challenge to explore how seamstresses crafted garments in the 90s. The final piece in my portfolio is this drawing I did based off of my grandma's wedding pictures. Weddings are arguably the most important day for fashion in a woman's life. Although this picture wasn't taken in the 90s, I decided to include it in my portfolio to again emphasize that no wave of feminism stands on its own. The high neckline worn on this dress is classic, and it reminds me of how some things never change, whether that be necklines throughout fashion history or perseverance throughout feminist history. There will always be constant themes that we can look to for unification. Thank you for listening to my research project on fashion design and third wave feminism. I hope you enjoyed and maybe feel motivated to express your research findings through art as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marley. That was so interesting. So if anyone has any questions, we have 2 minutes, well, 2 to 3 minutes. Please ask in either the chat or in the Q&A. I see that there's actually already one question in the Q&A, which is, what was the most surprising thing you learned from the surveys that you did, I'm assuming, with your high school girls?
So through my survey, one of the questions that I had asked was, what is the one item of clothing that when you wear it, you feel the most confident and the most empowered? And I just found it so interesting how there's such a broad range of answers. Some girls who I surveyed found that they felt most confident wearing super revealing clothing, but others felt most confident wearing things like pantsuits, which I know are associated with the workplace, and that feeling of having career power, which is something I looked into because I was just so interested in it. But I just thought it really spoke to the nature of fashion and how it's so individualist. You can't really generalize anything. So there was just so many different answers to these questions of what makes people feel confident. So I found that really interesting.
That's so cool. And just out of curiosity, how many people did you survey?
I surveyed 40 people.
Amazing. Cool. And Skye also had a question. Your style is so unique. What have been your biggest inspirations for it?
That's a really good question. I found a lot of inspiration from Pinterest when I was looking for the fashion side of things. So I would look at specific fashion houses from the 90s, specifically Calvin Klein, just because, as I sort of briefly mentioned in my presentation, I really like the minimalist design for clothing because I think it really emphasizes the beauty of the person who's wearing it, which I think is super important. So he was definitely my inspiration for a lot of the sewing stuff. And then in terms of the painting and the drawing, I usually find a lot of inspiration from artists on Instagram. So there's one named Ben Evans who I just really like his style of color blocking the paintings. So that was definitely something that I learned from and took inspiration from.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think we're up for time now in terms of questions. And thank you again. And I will introduce our next speaker. Let me So second, we have Skye Gohlinghorst, a homeschooled student from Pikesville, Maryland. And let me add them.
Hey, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep. And I will leave now and feel free to start sharing your screen.
All right. Oop, here we go. Hello. Hello. All right. Can you guys see the slides okay? Let's see. Yep, slides. All right. Sick. So, good evening, afternoon, good everything, everyone, because I know we have folks here from all over the world. So I'd like to open my presentation with a question for you all. Feel free to fire off answers in the chat and interact during my presentation. I'd love to get like community audience feedback. That'd be really awesome. So my question to you is, why do we consider poetry's way of ignoring grammar to convey meaning in art, but an English second language speaker's way of ignoring grammar to convey meaning an improper use of language? And down below we have two quotes, one from a poem I really love, and we'll see these at the end again, so don't worry about memorizing them or anything. And we have a second quote from my friend Spot, who's from Slovakia. They speak Slovak natively, and English is their second language. And they're such a sweetheart, and I love the way they put words together. So, quick introductions. My name is Skye. I use they, them pronouns, and this is my presentation chronicling my descent into madness as I grow to hate a dead man from the 1500s. One quick note, although my broader project dealt extensively with poetry, I'm not going to draw from any sort of analysis of it. Instead, I'm drawing from how poetry isn't beholden to grammar due to its societal status versus how an English second language speaker's struggle with grammar are dismissed due to a lack of intelligence, are dismissed as a lack of intelligence due to classism. All right, first, to answer the question I had originally posed you, we've got to take it apart. So what is the English language? Well, that's a fairly easy question to answer. It's the language we're speaking right now. Like any language, it's a collection of different dialects, which are sort of little language subgroups that have slightly different rules than their parent language. For instance, in Southern American English, you might call this critter here a crawdad rather than a crayfish. All right, so that's the English language. What is an English second language speaker? That's also easy. An English second language speaker is simply someone who speaks English without it being their native language. And this collection of flags here, every single one of those flags is a person from the person from the country who is an English second language speaker, who is like my personal friend, has had a significant impact on my life, or like I know them. All right, question number 3. What is grammar? This one's a little bit harder to answer. Just a smidge. Maybe like an 8-minute presentation harder. I promise it's not going to be boring though. I'm very funny and entertaining, and the only thing I love more than bragging about myself is talking about my interests. And oh boy, do I love English a normal amount. To put it simply, grammar is a way to describe and understand the structures of language. English grammar can be divided into 2 categories. Prescriptive, which is like prescribing a set of rules, and descriptive, which describes the rules and patterns already in place. Now, a little while ago, there was this guy. His name was William Belukar. And this Belukar fellow, who was a proper upper-class British scholar with an appreciation of Latin, had a lot of ideas, some of which were possibly good. Unfortunately, we will never know that because his major surviving idea sucked, in my professional opinion. In an attempt to prove that the English language was just as fancy and proper a language as Latin, he argued that it was also one governed by strict rules, which it is. He was right. However, rather than figuring out the rules of English, he applied rules from Latin, which did not work. English and Latin belong to 2 entirely different language families. So William Belukar started a, shall we say, popular trend of grammar being about prescriptivism. There would be this set of rules that everyone should follow all the time, both in speech and in writing, which doesn't work when you have a language with as many dialects as English. So, in a truly shocking turn of events, this turned out awful for everyone but well-educated white men. Let me let you all in on a little secret. None of us write in our first language. We all write in a very specific dialect. The thing about dialects is that they're all essentially like little baby languages, just waiting to grow up into big, strong ones, which means that when one is raised with a very specific dialect, especially learning another, especially when you don't know that you're learning another, because they don't tell you in school, like when you start learning to read and write, hey, we're teaching you a whole new language. This is the English language and the way you speak it is wrong. This is why students of color, especially Black inner city students, who will most likely speak a very specific version of African American Vernacular English, also known as AAVE, often struggle with writing in school. So that brings us to the question, what dialect do we write in? To absolutely nobody's surprise, the dialect of dead upper-class white men. It is known as Standard English, and it is a pain. The thing about Standard English that you've got to understand, though, is that it's a tool. It's a tool that allows us to understand each other better in professional settings because, to be frank, sometimes speaking with a British person is like speaking with an alien. Apologies to any Brits in the audience, but you know what I mean. It means that it makes professional communication across different dialects easier, and it provides a single dialect for English second language speakers to be taught. It's a tool, and it can be used for good. But, like all tools, it can, and quite often is, misused. So, Standard English, without any question, is a tool for classism. It is used to oppress already disadvantaged peoples, whether that be for their race, their nationality, class, or even their sexuality with, I'm referencing here, the gay accent. I am a very well-spoken person. I am someone who grew up surrounded by books. I was raised by people who love to read, and that has also infected me. My vocabulary was constantly challenged and expanded, and I was discouraged from picking up accents because people will judge me based on the way I speak. So I am very privileged in this regard, and I wanted to acknowledge that. This brings me, though, to another point. The way we speak is such an important part of culture. And a great example of language's sway over culture, in fact, is the implementation of Standard English, the dialect of people in power. We see how that affects people every single day with like how tests are written, how you're graded in school, how that affects you. It's used as an oppressive yoke of rules taken from a fossilized language that's not even in the same language family as ours. So it's making quite a mess. And that, my dear audience, is why William Belukar is my personal enemy. If I had a time machine, I'd go back in time just to deck this one guy. It wouldn't solve anything because one man does not create the killing machine that is the systemic erasure of language, but it would make me feel a lot better. But that actually brings me to a point. Surprise, there was one. Do you all remember the terrible year of our Lord 2016? How often we would hear that immigrants should learn our language? A lot. And the people saying it didn't mean that they wanted immigrants to have easy access to an English education. They wanted immigrants to forget their native language, their culture, their holidays, their everything, to become white in every single way but their skin. And then they wanted them dead because they were white supremacists. They were simply using the erasure of language as their weapon of choice. So, once more, I present to you my question, and this time I will offer you my answer. Why do we consider poetry's way of ignoring grammar to convey meaning an art, but an English second language speaker's way of ignoring grammar to convey meaning an improper use of language? My answer? There is no difference. Art is something inherent, and your words are always beautiful when they're doing what they're supposed to, which is communication. Thank you for your time, and thank you to my mentor, Alexis, for helping introduce me to so many different gorgeous uses of language, and to my mentor, GP, for helping me put the pieces together into something worth speaking about. The floor is now open for questions.
Thank you so much, Skye, for that wonderful presentation. I see there is one question, actually two, one from me actually in the chat, and then one in the Q&A. So the Q&A one is, do you think this is only applicable to the English language? And I'm not really sure when that this person asked this question, but I think it might have been, if that person can actually maybe
honestly, I feel that the clarification might be unnecessary because I feel that this is, every part of this is applicable to every language. I was simply using English because it's the one I'm most familiar with, but you can put this, for example, in Spanish, where Latin American Spanish, those dialects will likely be regarded, I don't have personal experience with this, but from my understanding, Latin American Spanish is often regarded as more incorrect than Spain Spanish. So that's just one example I'm more familiar with. But I'm sure that this can be applied to any language with multiple dialects.
Absolutely. And one of my questions, when you were talking about prescriptive versus descriptive grammar, I was just wondering whether in your research you had a sense of, among ESL speakers and learners, what is typically the hardest thing about English to learn?
Honestly, I've found that the hardest thing about English to learn, this isn't from my personal research for this project, this is just my experience of speaking with English second language learners and language teachers. It's that English is the hardest to learn because due to the way that prescriptivism was implemented, we have a lot of just random exceptions to all our rules, like the way you pluralize, just all of that. There's so many exceptions and you just have to flat out memorize them because they're not intuitive at all.
Totally. And then we actually have one more question, which is, I think, a really good one. If we don't have any rules, or if we sort of open up language completely, how do we expect people to understand each other?
Oh, no, we do have rules. That's the thing with descriptivism is we all inherently understand the rules of our native language. The thing about prescriptivism is it provides, or rather, we all understand the rules of our very specific dialect. Like, we often consider Southern American English like this accent with the y'all. We often consider that incorrect, but there's a very specific way that everyone speaks it. And they grew up speaking it, and they understand the rules of those dialects. But then we apply the rules from standard English, and that makes the whole thing a lot more complicated. So I'm not advocating for an anarchy of language. I'm rather advocating for respect for the rules of language that people were taught in their native tongues.
Awesome. All right, I think we're coming up to time here. Thank you so much again, Skye, for your wonderful presentation. And
thank you so much for having me here.
Yes, of course. All right, let me remove you. And then I will welcome up our next presenter. Our third presenter is Daniel Youssef, a student from Westboro, Massachusetts, studying in Advanced Math and Science Academy Charter School. Welcome, Daniel, and let me put you on the stage.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Youssef. I'm a student of the Advanced Math and Science Academy Charter School in Marlborough, Massachusetts. So I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. So this is Theory X and Theory Y, McGregor's theories of management applied to working from home in the era of COVID-19. So we have our agenda here. So during the breakout of the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of facets of life were affected, and I think one of the most salient changes was the changes to business practices. And one of the most obvious amongst those was the change from in-person work to remote work. So in that new workplace, the virtual workplace, employers have to know how to effectively manage their employees. And to do that, there are two management theories, Theory X and Theory Y. And they were both developed by Douglas McGregor, who was a professor of management at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So Theory X and Theory Y are two management styles, and they're both based upon different assumptions about employees. Theory X assumes that employees are lazy, that they don't like to work, and then the only way to motivate them is using external rewards and punishments. Theory Y assumes that employees like to work, and they don't need any external motivations to be motivated to do so. They basically like work for the sake of working. And because of that, the management style in regards to the employees is going to be less controlling. Okay, so before we get into the actual application of those management theories into employees who are working from home, we do have some preliminary studies as potential factors as to what could possibly influence an employee's preferred management style. So we have demographics and industry. So in studies of demographics, the main demographics were age and gender, and neither of those was actually found to have any correlation with an employee's preferred management style. However, industry did have a correlation, and it tended to differ pretty widely. Just some examples, the BPO industry, or the business process outsourcing industry in the Philippines, they preferred Theory X. The retail industry seemed to prefer Theory X from two studies, one at a Calvin Klein outlet and the other one at an Irish retail company. And both of those retail shops, they found that employees were best motivated with financial incentives. And financial incentives are external incentives, and because of that, they preferred Theory X management. School systems preferred Theory Y management, and in studies of public sector industries, it tended to differ within that. So if the public sector organization was more authoritarian, like the fire department or the Department of Motor Vehicles, they tended to prefer Theory X. But if the department was more creative, like the arts department or the Department of Parks and Recreation, they preferred Theory Y. And the last theoretical bit that we're going to be talking about is the theoretical framework. So to gain a better understanding of Theory X and Theory Y and how they can be applied to working from home, we also have to look at self-determination theory, or SDT. This is a theory of motivation that mainly focuses on the fulfillment of psychological needs. So just the basic tenets of this theory states that people have three basic psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy is the feeling of free will, competence is the need to learn skills and achieve mastery, and relatedness is a sense of belonging with others. This theory also dictates the types of motivation, extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation is based on rewards and punishments, and intrinsic motivation is based on self-motivation. And you may remember us talking about that when we were defining Theory X and Theory Y. So employees who are extrinsically motivated would prefer Theory X, and employees who are intrinsically motivated would prefer Theory Y. So now we can use all that information to make some propositions, which are going to be applied to employees who are working from home. So our first proposition is that an employee who feels their psychological needs are being fulfilled would perform better under Theory Y management. And our second proposition is that need fulfillment leads to a preference for Theory Y management to the extent that need fulfillment is associated with work. So now we have our application here. So there are three major differences between working from home and working in person, and I promise they're going to become much more relevant in a second. So our first one is that employees who are working from home are not around their coworkers as much. Number two is that employees who are working from home are not surrounded by distractions. And number three is that employees who are working from home may not have access to training programs. So say you're an employee and you're working from home and you feel the temptation to reach for your phone next to you. But if you choose to continue focusing on your work, you can achieve autonomy because you've made the decision to focus on your work. So employees may achieve autonomy in a virtual workplace. For our second example, if you're working from home, we'll say you were working in person and you were going through a training program, and all of a sudden COVID hits, you're working virtually. You might not have access to that same training program, say your business doesn't have the capital to do so. You may feel, well, I'm not really achieving all the skills I need to do my work effectively. I'm not going to be able to achieve competence. So employees may not be able to achieve our competence in a virtual workplace. And employees who are working from home may not be able to achieve relatedness because you're working virtually and not around your colleagues as much. Your interactions with them are pretty limited. So you may not be able to achieve relatedness in the workplace. And just to continue with our application here, we can make some framework recommendations. So managers really need to understand the type of employees that they have. If your employees are more extroverted, you should place more emphasis on relatedness because they work best when they're around others, especially their employees. If your employees are type A personality, meaning that they enjoy working and they sort of work better alone, then you place more emphasis on autonomy for need fulfillment. Just as an example, if you're a company that wants to boast relatedness, but inherently you can't achieve a theory-wise structure within your organization, you can hold an event like a virtual happy hour, and you can send surveys to employees on how they can better connect with each other while they're working remotely. Just to address our second proposition here, intrinsic motivation may increase if need fulfillment is associated with work. So to accomplish this, a company could possibly rename some of their events. Like they could rename a virtual happy hour to company-sponsored virtual happy hour to so that people can associate work with their need fulfillment. All right, just to wrap up here, our conclusions were that age and gender have no correlation with employees' preferred management style. Employees in the BPO industry, the retail industry, and authoritarian public sector organizations like the fire department prefer Theory X management. School systems and creative public sector departments, like the Parks and Recreation Department, prefer Theory Y management. And out of the three basic psychological needs, autonomy is the only one that's likely to be achieved in a remote work environment. So Theory X, therefore, is more effective in the remote work environment unless work programs are made available. Thank you, everyone, and I would also like to thank my mentor Andrew for his constant guidance throughout this project.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Daniel. Now let's go to the questions. We have one question so far. What got you interested in management theory in the first place? This is very interesting.
Well, really my interest actually started with psychology, and I was really looking at applications of psychology, because I was really looking at psychology and I was thinking, how can we apply this beyond just the basic content? And I was reading about IO psychologists or industrial organizational psychologists who work with psychology in the workplace and how can be applied to employees. And I found that information really interesting.
Cool. And we have one other question from Lynn. It is a very interesting research. How is your methodology applied?
That's a good question. So basically, as you saw before, a lot of it was kind of theoretical. I looked at a lot of studies that all looked at slightly different aspects. So a few papers that were looking at the basic psychological needs, and I looked at any information that really was repeated in multiple papers that that sort of seemed to papers had information that sort of agreed with each other, and a lot of it just sort of clicked together as I was writing it. Especially in regards to the basic psychological needs and how they interacted with the two management styles. A lot of it just sort of came together as I was working on it.
Got it. All right, we're coming up to time. Thank you so much again, Daniel, for your awesome presentation. And I'm going to bring up our next presenter. So fourth, we have Devon Thompson, a student from Agawam, Massachusetts, studying in Berkshire School. And I'm going to add him to the stage now.
Oh, nice. Wow, that was smooth. That was a smooth transition. I didn't know.
Hi, Devon.
Hi.
Awesome. So I'm going to leave, and then I'll come back when you have 2 minutes left. So you can start sharing your screen.
I don't really know how to share my screen.
So it's the little screen with a red slash
Okay.
through it.
All right. Yeah. Wait, oh no. Can you see now? Can you see that?
Not yet.
Oh no.
So do you see that little screen, that little TV monitor with a red slash? If you click it, it'll ask you whether you want to share your entire screen or a window or a tab.
Oh, okay. I'm just gonna share. Yeah, I'm clicking the thing and I'm saying share, and it won't share. Can you see it now?
Oh, it works now. Yep,
Oh,
perfect. All right, take it away.
Thank you. Anyway, I can make this bigger. Jeez. Okay, well, I guess everyone's gonna have to look at my tabs. It's okay. But hello, my name is Devon Thompson. I'm a senior from Agawam, Massachusetts. And firstly, I want to thank my mentor, Nora, for guiding me through this summer. It was a really fun time, and I learned a lot of great things. She's literally the best. She really helped me pursue my interest. And I also want to say thank you to all of those at Polygence for providing the platform for these amazing projects to be displayed. Happiness for them. So it's so great, so great. In a nutshell, my project focuses on understanding Republican voting trends in Massachusetts, especially for those that fall in the demographic of the white working class. So before we get into the nitty gritty, I feel it's important to understand some specific context so we could really understand why my research question of why Massachusetts Republicans vote against their socioeconomic self-interest is so engaging and significant. So one of the most important things falls under the realm of human behavior, because in a nutshell, humans tend to take actions that increase their utility. So, their well-being. Charles Whelan notes this well in his book, Naked Economics, when he states, why did the chicken cross the road? Well, because it wanted to maximize its utility. The chicken saw something on the other side of the road, and therefore crossing it would make it better off. It wanted to go get something, and this can be really, related to humans, because humans also want to increase their utility. They also want to make themselves better off. So they usually make decisions that will do that. They usually, what's on the other side of the road for humans is money. And they usually make decisions that are going to increase their financial well-being. So taking that in consideration, combined with the studying poverty levels of, 12.5 Americans are in poverty, according to the Census Bureau, and over 70% of Americans claim that they struggle financially in some form, it's hard not to ask the question of why so many individuals who struggle financially are still supporting a party that cuts taxes for the rich, especially in Massachusetts, a super blue state. So basically, I completed this research within my town of Agawam, which is a historically red town in Massachusetts. Throughout the last 6 elections, they sided with Republican lawmakers. So they voted, Trump the last 2 elections, Romney the elections before that, and before that they voted, Republican as well. So basically, my overall research pertains to trying to find out why the working class Republicans in Massachusetts, or really anywhere, because as you will find, Massachusetts Republicans aren't that much different from Deep South Republicans. Why do they vote against their socioeconomic self-interest? So now when I ask this question, many of you may ask, like, what does that even mean? Like, what does voting against your socioeconomic self-interest even mean? And we can acknowledge that with a brief commentary on Republican and Democratic policy. So time is crunch, so I'm going to try to keep it brief. But overall, Democrats tend to push for policy that will promote social welfare, They support welfare, some support free college or debt relieving. But in several instances, Republicans are seeing cutting taxes for the rich and big corporation owners, and seeing voting and signing legislation that will put more cash in the pockets of corporation owners and CEOs, in hopes that trickle-down economics will end up bringing the money to the working class. So Republicans tend to disapprove of institutions that put money directly into the pockets of Americans. It's conservative instinct to express disdain for welfare, free college, and especially socialism. A good example of this, like pertaining to something pretty recent, is the polar ideologies when it comes to COVID relief. While Rand Paul was chanting "How insane! Free money for everyone," when referring to the stimulus checks that were going out to the Americans that needed it. Democrats like Cory Booker were saying, we need money in the pockets of Americans. So considering human nature and the desire to increase your financial well-being and utility, how can someone ignore the financial benefits of voting Democrat? So now we know the questions and the context, and now we can get into the details of how I did my research. So basically within my town, I conducted multiple interviews with 10 families. I went there multiple times into their homes. It was a great time. And I stemmed and tracked conversations with dozens and dozens of people within my town. In addition, I have a lot of research that comes from books, online, articles, everywhere, JSTOR, wherever. But overall, the bulk of my information comes from the interviews and directly from the people I talked to in the town. And as I talked earlier, my town's a Republican town, so it puts me in a good spot to do the research because I'm able to just talk with Massachusetts Republicans directly. So here are my research questions that I focus on for my research. So when I went and conducted the interviews, these 4 questions kind of stimulated the biggest responses, and ended up with like the most development for my projects of understanding why they're voting the way they're voting. So we start with the question of what is religion, and this one was a really big question, an important question. So some of the main takeaways from this question pertain to which party, according to the people that I talked to and overall trends, is more religious. And every single person I've talked to who identified as Republican within my town communicated to me their strong faith in the Christian, Catholic, Baptist, Protestant religions. However, there was not the same strength of faith with the Democratic families and Democratic individuals that I talked to. Surprisingly, around only half of the Democrats I talked to in my town believed in a higher power. And that higher power most of the time was not even God all the time. So it's safe to say that the Democrats were not as religious as the Republicans. And this is crucial because it connects to my next point, and that is a supermajority of these Republicans who identify with the religion are in strong opposition with social democratic policy. To all but one Republican family that I spoke to, abortion was a huge no-no. They were heavily opposed to gay rights, and this signifies a huge aspect of the answer to my overall question. Because religion stems single-issue voting, which is usually in favor against the Democratic social policies because of what they support and what the religion asks them to support. So basically, in a nutshell, they're saying, I don't care about money, but I care about serving God, and I'll do my best to do that by voting for a Republican Party. And lastly, this really mirrors the South. Obviously, as many probably already know, the South Republicans are very religious. 84% claim that religion is very important to them. And we see this phenomenon of single issue voting, both in the South and Massachusetts. It's very closely linked. And Thomas Frank cites this in the same idea in his book, What's the Matter with Kansas, when explaining how Kansas went from a blue state to a red state. Basically just religion, single issue voting, and which party that these voters believe best serves God. In many times the working class Republicans believe that it's the Republican Party that's going to better serve God, so they really don't care about the money, but rather the single issue like abortion and gay rights, so they vote for the Republican Party. So next, really important question is, what do you think of today's culture? So here it is, right? Culture matters, and it's so important because Republicans in Massachusetts and all over the country believe that culture matters more than money. The state of American culture is severely important to these people because they believe that politics is dependent, or culture is dependent on politics, right? So as many could have guessed, the Democrats were frowned upon by almost all the Republicans I spoke to because, their supposed impact on the American culture they believe is negative. So when Republican men in Massachusetts are in favor of casting their ballot for the party that they believe is going to bring in more ideal American culture. And this also ties with religion because, things like abortion, things like, gay rights, that's also tied to culture and what these Republicans believe to be, part of culture. Are we going to create a culture where abortion is okay, where people who are gay are going to be able to do whatever they want, so it was very tied in that way. So basically, money doesn't matter as much as culture, and this idea is extremely in line with the South. Frank again cites this in his book "What's the Matter with Kansas?" What's the Matter with Kansas, when he describes how Republicans and Democrats were kind of in a cultural war around that was heavily tied to religion.
I may actually have to cut you off a little bit early, Devon, because we're actually at 9 minutes now. But I think let's go straight to the questions, and we can have audience members connect with you afterwards if they want to learn more about the other findings of your with the questions. So one question we had.
I knew it was gonna be so long. Like, my fault.
No worries. This was already a really great sort of tip of the iceberg presentation of your research, which is just really awesome. So we had one question from Skye. Wow, you did so much research. Did you make any new friends through your interviews? I think this is a really, really interesting question.
Yeah, I did make a lot of friends. It was a really great time. I got to go into like so many different people's houses with their families multiple times and like learn so much about like the dynamics of their family, just so much. And so I did make a lot of friends. But I also learned a lot of funny things about some of the people that live very close to me. So that was definitely very interesting, a little scary because some of their ideas are so radical, so racist, and so sexist, and they live so close to me in my hometown in Massachusetts, a super blue state. So I can only imagine, what's going on in other states that are in the deep South.
Yeah. And another question, personally, do you feel the political tension in your town? And also, is there dialogue across people who hold different political beliefs outside of obviously you conducting academic research, but sort of like day to day, do you feel like, there's dialogue?
Yeah, I believe there's blatant dialogue, and that's something that I don't really see. Like, I go to boarding school, and there's a lot of Republicans that go to this boarding school, but they are very reluctant to even communicate the fact that they are Republican. But what I saw in my hometown was there's Trump flags everywhere. People are openly expressive about their political views and are very proud of them and will talk about them with anybody and are not scared to say, oh, you're just a liberal that wants to cancel me and blah blah blah. And there's a lot of talk about politics that I saw in my town. People don't want to talk with me though because they know I like to debate. So it's
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for your awesome presentation, and we're gonna have to move to Rachana's. So thanks, Devon.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. And I'm going to invite Rachana to the stage. So last but not least, we have Rachana Kadikar, a junior from North Carolina studying in William G. and Low High School. Oh, I think, Rachana, do you mind requesting share again? I think you disappeared. Rachana? Awesome.
Hi.
Feel free to start sharing your screen, and I will leave once you start sharing, and we'll start timing.
Okay, sorry. There's like an issue with Google Chrome. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Do you see the little monitor with the... Let's see. Okay, let me add her back.
Okay, sorry. My browser put it on me, but let me share.
Awesome. Awesome. Take it away.
Okay. Hi, guys. So my name is Rachana Kadikar, and I am currently a senior in Enlo. So I did my project on reducing gender disparities in unpaid labor, and I looked into public and private policies for this. So first, I'm going to go through an introduction, which is the background and context behind the issue. Then I'm going to talk about policies that redistribute unpaid labor, such as family planning, stereotypes, and workplace policies. Then I'm going to go into policies that reduce unpaid labor, such as time-saving technology and public care policies. So first, my introduction. So if women were paid the federal minimum wage for their work, the total global monetary value of unpaid work by women would sum up to about 10.9 trillion a year, which in context is greater than the top 50 combined GDPs of the top 50 global countries. So here is a graphic of the gendered unpaid labor distribution globally. So as you can see, the graph shows the amount of time men and women are spending daily on average in each country, and it outlines the gender disparities in unpaid labor distribution. So on average, women spend 126.9 more minutes on unpaid labor daily than their male counterparts. So why is this relevant? So ultimately, society is limited by these disparities in unpaid labor due to women's limited financial and social independence, limited economic prosperities due to a significant portion of the population devoting time and energy towards unpaid labor, and perpetuated stereotypes about mothers' working productivity. Therefore, it is crucial that public policymakers and private entities address these disparities in unpaid labor so that globally society can thrive and grow further and women's empowerment can reach new heights. So my next section is redistributing unpaid labor. So family planning is a huge policy option to reduce unpaid labor and gender disparities. So in the past century, the use of family planning has increased exponentially, especially in developed countries. Family planning and labor force participation for women are closely intertwined. A study done in India shows that in rural villages, being visited by a family planning public worker leads to women being more likely to participate in the labor force. Investments that destigmatize family planning, as well as raise awareness about it, like the social workers in India, can help propel those in developing countries toward gender equality and away from constraining traditional gender roles. In sub-Saharan Africa, research has shown that the current conditions of childbearing without adequate family planning resources reduces the growth rates of the economies, with the hardest hit members within them being women. When contrasting data from Southeast Asia and Africa, studies link higher growth levels and lower poverty levels to investment in family planning. So equal access to education remains an issue, with almost 5 more million girls never entering a classroom than boys, and significantly fewer girls moving on to a secondary school than boys. Eliminating school fees can increase enrollment significantly, as demonstrated through several African countries. Ghana's enrollment increased by 12%, Kenya's enrollment increased by 18%, Ethiopia's increased by 23%, and Malawi's increased by 51%. Simply educating parents on the potential benefits of putting their children in school can produce significant results, as with information about the value of school can increase benefits 600 times the cost of $2.30 it takes to educate the parents of each child. So much of our morals and worldviews are based on what we were exposed to as children. So therefore, younger generations are a valuable group to target to achieve significant change in societal mentalities in the long term. Mexico began an income support program known as Prospera that provides cash payments if parents send their children to school and if they are regularly attending. As a result of this program, the amount of unpaid work girls were doing was reduced by 1 hour a week. and school enrollment for girls increased by 20%. Policies like We Care and Oxfam Initiative target individual norms and have demonstrated highly promising results for reducing gender disparities in unpaid labor, especially when they target both parents and are in high contact for 6 to 18 months. Ad campaigns can also work by appreciating the value of unpaid care work and normalizing unpaid care work by men. Superman is Back is a South Korean reality TV show, and it attempted to normalize the idea of men doing more unpaid care work in households. So decades ago, a feminist group in Iceland organized a women's strike to promote gender equality. On October 24th, 1975, 90% of women in Iceland from all communities did not go to their paid jobs or perform unpaid labor. Sorry. In more developed countries, there still exists major differences in parenting, like allowance inequality and more of an overprotective parenting approach for their daughters, which directly contributes to mentalities about gender roles. Values such as empathy that tend to be instilled in women from childhood are also completely different from the traits labeled as masculine that are valued in the corporate world, such as competitiveness or leadership. This makes it more difficult for women to climb the ladder and seek out higher paying competitive jobs in the first place. The private sector can make a difference by making children's toys more gender neutral and by promoting equality in media, such as advertisements or children's shows. A valuable policy step to increase women's labor force participation and decrease discrimination is pay transparency. This means making businesses share details about how they distribute wages and the processes behind employment decisions. Numerous studies show a positive correlation between paternity leave and decreased disparities in unpaid labor. For example, Sweden's gender-neutral parental leave has contributed to the almost equitable distribution of household tasks between spouses, and women's significant increase in the labor force participation rate. Paternity leave has demonstrated promising results. In Sweden, with the use it or lose it policy for paternity leave, there is a negative correlation between the length of the parental leave and the hours dedicated to work outside of the home, indicating that men are more likely to take on more unpaid labor the longer the leave they take. Family-friendly policies are also a vital step to take for many countries. Pursuing policies that help parents maintain a family as well as participate in the labor force is a valuable step for countries to take in order to redistribute the unpaid labor among partners. So, my last section was reducing unpaid labor, so policies that reduce unpaid labor. So, time-saving technology is a huge one. So, for example, for electrification, in areas with the average increase in electrification of 0.15, there's a 1.3 increase in the male employment rate and a 1.8% increase in the female employment rate. Women work 8.9 hours more a week, and men work 13 hours more a week on paid labor when compared to the same groups without the electrification rates. Policies that increase accessibility of clean water for households in low and middle income countries have the potential to ease the lives and improve the health of thousands of people in dozens of countries, and more importantly, significantly decrease the amounts of unpaid labor for households. For example, the hippo roller, as demonstrated in the picture on the left. So NextDrop is another private startup in India that has great potential to increase the efficiency of controlling the clean water supply. NextDrop improves water services management with mobile technologies by providing information on water availability and working with citizens, government, and water utilities to increase feedback and effectiveness of the distribution of water. In Nicaragua, women who had increased access to energy were 23% more likely to seek paid work activities. So public childcare services. Publicly provided childcare programs have been proven to significantly reduce unpaid labor and increase the labor force participation rate. Mexico launched a public daycare program known as the Programa de Estancias Infantiles para Apoyar a Madres Trabajadoras, which provides financial support to daycare centers, subsidized care services for low-income parents seeking work, or obtaining an education, and training for care professionals. In India, the NGO Mobile Creches provided childcare services for women employed in public work programs on construction sites. Mobile Creches ensures childcare, including health, nutrition, and early education for children up to age 12 living on the construction sites of New Delhi, India. Similarly, Sweden expanded their affordable childcare facilities, such as daycare and preschools, to working mothers combined with public elderly care, which helps women who couldn't work before due to impending care responsibilities to manage paid work. So thank you for listening. Do you have any questions?
Thank you so much, Rachana. So we have, I think, one question, and then we should all head over to the keynote speaker. So if you could implement one policy change tomorrow, if you had a magic wand, what would it be? In the US, I'm assuming.
Okay, that's a pretty good question. I think I would probably go with the paid parental leave in the US because US is definitely like has a lot of like a reduction already done, and then paid parental leave has shown like huge promises for like more developed countries. So for the US, I would definitely go for the paid parental leave.
Totally. If I could, I would give you that magic wand today so you could just ding and change things. All right, let's all head over to the stages where Stanford Professor Margot Garrison will be giving the keynote speech. So thank you, everyone. Amazing, amazing job. We had a full house today, and the judges will put in their scores, and good luck to everyone. See you at the keynote speech.